Right, so I'm going to try an episode 0, starting now. Hello and welcome to episode 0. I'm very excited to admit that this is the first podcast. Please bear with me, as we will improve as the episodes come. So I just wanted to talk you through what you can expect in the upcoming series. So an introduction, shall we say, as an episode 0. I'm going to talk about what format the show is, the kind of topics that we're talking through, the reasons that I've chosen those, who the guests will be. I also want to talk a little through the personal journey that I've been on, which helps to contextualize the mission behind starting this podcast. Most importantly, though, this is going to be a series focused on real people who are working, passionately to find solutions to what I see and many others see as our greatest challenge, which is around climate change. So, how is the show delivered? I hear you wondering. Well, you can expect each episode to last for around 30 minutes, in which I personally will interview a guest. We're a new podcast, so we're going to have a crack at releasing 10 initial episodes, and they'll be released weekly. With any luck, we'll get some positive feedback, and we'll be able to continue and create more. So, what topics are we going to talk through? Well, we're discussing 3 areas. Together, they create what I see as the cleantech startup space. So first and foremost, entrepreneurship. The people who are seeing opportunities, how do they see them? How do they find them? How do they make that jump into the unknown? So we're going to talk through how to design, launch, and run a new business. How hard is it to get early traction, for example? How resilient must you be on your entrepreneurial journey? The second area is environmental sustainability. What do I define this as? Well, simple search online. It's defined as a state in which the demands placed on the environment can be met without reducing its capacity to allow all people to live well now and in the future. We'll explore quite a few avenues, actually, I hope. For example, which areas of our economy are most important to focus on in order to achieve this? Energy, fashion, food. There are so many different areas that create carbon emissions, and understanding which is the best to focus on is a really critical key in making us more sustainable. How is climate change affecting us and other species that we share the planet with? And what does a sustainable future actually look like? So you'll be lucky to learn from some people that really do have incredible vision for what the green economy might well look like in, well, I'd love to say 10 years, but it may well be longer. The third and final area that kind of pulls this all together is the venture capital business. So to take again a simple online definition, this is a form of investment focused on early stage companies. They're deemed to have high growth potential, but also a high chance of failure. It's a fascinating space and something that I've really only started to learn about in the last couple of years. It's critical to our transition to a green economy, and it's the financial engine room for clean tech. Well, this will, I guess, bury into things like what products and services will people demand in the future? Which technology will be able to achieve scale? Who is building the best team? Well, the best team that is best placed to execute their vision and create returns. Personally, it's such an exciting area when you look at these 3 topics combined, and I hope you feel that passion too. So what kind of guests can you expect on the show? Who are you going to be listening and learning from? Well, one thing I will do is promise to bring you an inspirational set of guests. They're going to be market leaders in their respective fields, and as I see, they'll successfully be taking bold steps to build clean tech companies. They will either be founders of startups or investors in startups, ensuring their insights are real and relevant. Importantly, in what I hope to be a real point of difference to other entrepreneurship or VC podcasts out there, these guests are all unified by their vision of the green economy. So I explained I wanted to talk through a little bit about myself and explain where this is coming from as a project. So I live in London and I work in the clean tech startup space. This, however, wasn't always the case. To start the story, I think it's probably best to go back to university, where I studied a BA management at the University of Leeds and received, in a sense, the traditional capitalist business school education. Very lucky to get that. And at the time, I became interested in sustainability, having read some amazing books such as Jonathan Porritt, Capitalism as if the World Matters, Mark Linus, 6 Degrees. It was a time, this was around 2011, I guess, that climate change wasn't necessarily top of the bill, but you could also listen and watch things like Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth. And it made so much sense to me. As I left uni, I had the sliding doors moments that I'm sure many people experience. And one job was with a solar startup that was selling residential solar solutions, unpaid internship for a few months, and the other was with a international shipping business. And I chose the paid job and moved into the shipping world. That took me to Singapore, where I spent 5 happy years working in Asia. And well, so I was an international freight market broker. This basically means you're the middleman between people with ships and people with cargo. And in my particular case, I worked in the dry bulk market. This was an area that is dominated by 2 commodities that I was involved in, iron ore and coal. Iron ore is the base ingredient for steel. And coal, of course, used to actually melt the iron ore and create steel, but also for electricity power. And through this job, I learned a massive amount about international trade, the amount of cargo volumes on the sea at any one time. So, for example, 1.2 billion tons of coal is still shipped annually. 1 billion tons of iron ore is moving around the world at any one time. The environmental damage of our addiction to fossil fuels it's insane. And this is something I witnessed firsthand. So going back 2-3 years ago now, there was a really interesting kind of macro moment where I had some Indian clients and they were buying coal from Indonesia for their coal power stations in India. Subject to the fact that India actually has a lot of coal itself, but they're not as efficient as mining and shipping, so you could buy it cheaper from abroad. And they have local energy tenders. And during this is when the local state in India will say, we need a gigawatt of energy. Who can supply it? And many people will see this happening. The kilowatt hour rupee price that was being accepted as the winner at these tenders was very, very cheap. And it was being bid by solar businesses. This was back in 2016, I noticed this. Essentially, it became cheaper to build a new solar power station than it was to build a new coal farm. A new coal power station. Essentially, it became the case that it was cheaper to build a solar farm than it was to build a new coal power station. This is obviously a critical turning point in energy infrastructure, and one of the drivers of the dry bulk freight market is coal. It's a huge commodity resource that people make a lot of money from, moving it around the world and burning it. And I was like, hang on, this is crazy. We now have a clean technology that is cheaper than the existing fossil fuel market. That's really interesting. And so I decided to resign from my job. This is 2.5 years ago, and jump into the clean tech space. So to bring me to the last couple of years, the process of career changing is very tricky, as people may well have tried. But essentially, I wanted to get into early stage sustainability startups, and I did that initially by trying to become an angel investor. An angel investor is a very, very early stage buyer of equity in new businesses that are looking to raise some startup capital and bring their dreams into the world. And I looked at about 50 companies on my own, quickly realized that I wasn't nearly skilled enough, and that actually entrepreneurs, the best ones, were looking for a combination of 3 things. 1, of course, capital. 2, experience, so mentorship from people that have been and done it. And number 3 was then contacts. So I actually didn't have all 3 of those things. I, however, got some advice at the time, which was join a syndicate. This way you can spread your risk, make much smaller size investment ticket sizes, and learn from the due diligence. I came across a syndicate called the Green Angel Syndicate, who I joined. And for the last 2 years, I've now been lucky to place 9 investments with them. It's an amazing process for someone like myself, who was new to the startup space, who didn't understand how to do due diligence in companies, who didn't understand how to look at market sizing, who didn't understand anything really. And I started hearing terms like term sheets and shareholder agreements and scale and defensibility and venture capital even. And frankly, the process has been fascinating, and it's one of the reasons to start this podcast. So moving on from there and joining the Green Angel Syndicate, I started learning about entrepreneurs and meeting people that had ideas. They were trying to bring them out into the world. And in particular, conjunction with the sustainability angle, this was fascinating. And I realized if I wanted to be an investor in entrepreneurs, well, actually, you need to try and be one yourself. And so this took me to the other side of the table, so to speak. And personally, I've been involved in maybe 4 or 5 different projects over the last 2 years, trying to start companies myself. This took me through the energy market, so trying a smart meter analysis business for homeowners to help them install solar panels. And it took me through a talent first investment accelerator, which is called Entrepreneur First. A real highlight actually of the last 2 years in terms of the people I met and the techniques and skills that I learned from it in terms of what was basically a crash course in tech entrepreneurship. Anyway, none of these projects have yet worked. Along the way, I started listening to podcasts, and you could learn so much from listening to other people's journeys, and I just find the whole process, it's just awesome. I couldn't, however, find one that consistently was talking about sustainability goals and startups and investing, and that is the genesis for this podcast, which I'm hoping will find some success. If we do, the ability to pull together and collaborate with people that are focused on this mission but need help to find contacts or to find experience or perhaps to find money, hopefully we can help to pull those things together. This, of course, is then in a macro environment at the moment where the Paris Agreement was agreed a few years ago. We have a climate emergency now in play in the UK, largely on the back of the protests by the Extinction Rebellion and London being shut down for 4 or 5 days. Not only that, the weather is changing. People are seeing a difference and asking questions why. On the other side of the fence, you have an American government that's currently in denial. And these are just some of the kind of drivers for me to bring the stories of these people that we were going to speak to a wider audience. And if we can, we're going to help to inspire other people to work towards this goal that I see as so important and share that with many other people. So yeah, that's my story. And that's the reason for starting this podcast. I hope you enjoy the series upcoming. And and thank you very much. Always get in touch if you ever had any questions.